So thank you very much for doing this, Mr. President.
Спасибо большое, господин президент, за то, что принимаете нас.
I thought we'd start with some of the news you made today at your State of the Nation address, and then we'll move into some facts about you in preparation for our hour-long piece that we're putting together. And then tomorrow, when we have a longer time together, we'll talk about more substantive issues together, if that's okay with you.
Пожалуйста.
Of course, yes,
great.
yes, let's please do that.
So you announced today that Russia has developed new nuclear-capable weapons systems, including an intercontinental ballistic missile that you say renders defense systems useless. Several analysts in the West have said this is the declaration of a new Cold War. Are we in a new arms race right now?
In my opinion, the people you have mentioned are not analysts. What they do is propaganda. Why? Because everything I spoke about today was done not on our initiative. It is a response to the U.S. ballistic missile defense program and Washington's unilateral withdrawal from the anti-ballistic missile treaty in 2002. If we speak of the arms race, it began at that very moment, when the United States pulled out of the ABM treaty. We wanted to prevent this. We called on our American partners to work together on these programs. Firstly, we asked them not to withdraw from the treaty, not to destroy it, but the U.S. pulled out. It was not us who did this, but the U.S. Yet we again suggested we work together even after this. I told my colleague then, imagine what would happen if Russia and the U.S. joined forces in the crucial area of strategic security. The world would change for a long period to come, and the level of global security would rise to an all-time high. The reply was, this is very interesting, but they ultimately rejected all our proposals. Then I said, you understand that we will have to improve our offensive arms systems to maintain a balance and to have the ability to overcome your BMD systems. They replied that they were not developing the BMD systems to counter us, that we were free to do as we pleased, and that they would not view our actions as spearheaded against the U.S.
That happened right after 9/11. That was 3 months after 9/11.
После 2001 года примерно, после 11 сентября.
No, it was after the U.S. withdrew from the ABM Treaty in 2002, and the conversations I mentioned were in 2003, 2004.
At the time that happened, I believe you were quoted as saying you thought that was a mistake on the part of the United States, but not a threat. Do you perceive the United States as a threat today?
We have always said that developing the missile defense system creates a threat to us. We have always said that. Our American partners would not publicly admit it, claiming that the system was spearheaded mainly against Iran. But eventually, in conversations and during talks, they admitted that, of course, the system will destroy our nuclear deterrence potential. Imagine the situation. What was the point of signing the treaty back in 1972? The United States and the Soviet Union had only two regions that they defended from missile attacks, one in the United States and one in the Soviet Union. That created a threat for a potential aggressor who would be struck in response. In 2002, the United States said, we do not need this anymore. We will create anything we want globally all over the world.
Again, in the wake of 9/11, just to make that clear, 9/11 happened on September 11th of 2001, and the United States was reassessing its security posture in the world for good reason, wouldn't you admit?
No, not for good reason. This is complete nonsense, because the missile defense system protects from the kind of ballistic missiles that no terrorists have in their arsenal. This is an explanation for the housewives watching your program. But if these housewives can hear what I'm saying, if you show it to them and they hear me, they will understand that 9/11 and the missile defense system are completely unrelated. To defend themselves from terrorist attacks, the major powers must join their efforts against the terrorists rather than create threats for each other.
About the weapon that you announced today, the ICBM, have you actually tested it and it works? Because some analysts are suggesting you've tested it and it's failed, and that's why you only showed animations of it today and have not yet produced any actual videos.
I spoke about several systems today. Which one you're referring to? The heavy-duty intercontinental ballistic missile?
Yes, the one that you claim renders defense systems useless.
All the systems I mentioned today easily overcome missile defense. Each one of them. This is the point of all these developments.
But you've tested it?
Yes, of course.
And it's worked?
You did very well. Some of these systems require additional work. Some of them are already deployed. Some are in serial production. Getting back to the beginning of our conversation, there is a missile defense system deployed in Alaska. The distance between Russia's Chukotka and Alaska is only 60 kilometers. Two systems are being deployed in Eastern Europe. One is already in place in Romania. Construction of another one is almost finished in Poland. There is also the Navy. U.S. ships are based very close to Russian shores, both in the south and the north. Imagine if we placed our missile systems along the U.S.-Mexico or the U.S.-Canada border in their territories on both sides and brought our ships in from both sides. What would you say? Would you take action? Meanwhile, we would respond that you are escalating the arms race. Ridiculous, isn't it? This is exactly what is happening.
But just to come back, so are you saying that we are in a new arms race?
I want to say that the United States, when it withdrew from the ABM Treaty in 2002, forced us to begin developing new weapon systems. We told our partners about it, and they said, do whatever you like. Fine, that is what we did, so enjoy.
You disclosed that Russia was developing an intercontinental ballistic missile that was powered by nukes that could render defense systems useless?
Of course not. I did not know at the time how we could respond, to be honest. So it seems that our partners believed we would have nothing to respond with. Our economy was in dire straits, as well as the defense sector and the army. Therefore, I do not think anybody could have thought that in such a short period of time we would be able to make such a gigantic leap in the development of strategic weapons. I think the CIA must have told the US president that we would not do anything in response, while the Pentagon said something like, and we will develop a powerful cutting-edge global anti-missile system. So they did. But I will answer your question directly. I can tell you what we told our American partners, what I said personally at the time.
And just to clarify, do you mean George W. Bush?
Who was president in 2002, 2003, 2004.
But did this happen continuously, or was it just during that time frame?
Actually, we kept going on about it for 15 years. I said almost literally that we would not develop a system of anti-missile defense the way you're doing, firstly, because it's too expensive and we don't have the resources, and secondly, we don't know how it will all work, and you don't know, and we certainly don't either. But to preserve the strategic balance so that you would not be able to zero out our nuclear deterrence forces, we will develop strike systems that will be able to break your anti-missile systems. We said this plainly and openly without any aggression. I just stated what we would do, nothing personal. And the response was, we're not doing this against you, but you do whatever you want, and we will presume that it is not directed against us, not against the United States.
Let's talk about present day and going forward, because what you said today was that you'll use these weapons if Russia or her allies come under attack. And the question is whether you meant any attack or only a nuclear attack on Russia or its allies.
Давайте о сегодняшних днях поговорим и о будущем.
I heard the question. I would also like to say that in 2004, I mentioned this today, I said at the news conference that we will be developing weapons and even mentioned a concrete missile system, Avangard, as we call it. It is called Avangard now, and then I simply spoke of it, how it would work. I openly said how it would work. We hope that this would be heard and the U.S. would discuss it with us and discuss cooperation. But no, it was as if they had not heard us. Strategic offensive arms reduction and an anti-missile defense system are different things. We will be reducing the number of delivery vehicles and warheads under the New START treaty. This means that the numbers will be reduced on both sides, but at the same time, one party, the United States, will be developing anti-missile systems. This will ultimately lead to a situation where all our nuclear missiles, Russia's entire nuclear potential, will be reduced to zero. This is why we have always linked this. This is how it was in the Soviet-American times. These are natural things. Everyone understands
But
this.
it's your contention that the 4,000 nukes that Russia now has cannot penetrate the existing military defense system?
They can. Today they can. But you are developing your anti-missile systems. Anti-missiles range is increasing, and so is their accuracy. These weapons are being upgraded. This is why we need to respond to this appropriately, so that we are able to penetrate the system not only today but also tomorrow when you acquire new weapons.
Well, that's why it would be a big deal if you really did have a nuclear-powered ICBM, which people are questioning whether you have a usable one right now. And when you said earlier that you have some that have tested positively and excellent, you said others have not. So for the record, right now, do you have a workable ICBM that's powered by nukes that you've tested successfully?
Послушайте, я не говорил.
Look, I did not say that the testing of some of these systems had been unsuccessful. All the tests were successful. It's just that each of these weapon systems is in a different stage of readiness. One is already on alert duty in line units. Another one is in the same status. The work is proceeding on schedule with regard to some systems. We have no doubt that they will be in service, just as we had no doubt in 2004 that we would make a missile with the so-called cruise glide re-entry vehicle. You have been referring all the time to intercontinental ballistic missiles, new
You
missiles.
keep mentioning ICBMs.
No. I'm saying that we are developing just one brand of new heavy missile, which will replace a missile that we call Voyevoda, and you've dubbed it Satan. We will replace it with a new and more powerful missile. Here it is, a ballistic missile. All the other missiles are not ballistic. Therein lies the entire meaning of this, because any anti-missile defense system operates against ballistic missiles, and we have created a set of new strategic weapons that do not follow ballistic trajectories, and the anti-missile defense systems are powerless against them. This means that the U.S. taxpayers' money has been wasted.
But again, you say that you're going to use these weapons, these nuclear-powered weapons, if Russia or its allies come under attack. Any attack, or only a nuclear one?
У нас два.
There are two reasons why we would respond with our nuclear deterrence forces: a nuclear attack on the Russian Federation or a conventional attack on the Russian Federation, given that it jeopardizes the state's existence.
Угроза существованию государств.
That's consistent with the existing Russian doctrine on use of nuclear weapons.
Exactly. There are two possible reasons for a nuclear retaliation.
Are you interested in new talks to extend the new Strategic Arms Control Treaty?
Ну, у нас скоро заканчивается.
The START 3 treaty will expire soon. We are ready to continue this dialogue. What do we consider important? We agree to a reduction or to retaining current terms to a reduction in delivery vehicles and warheads. However, today, when we are acquiring weapons that can easily breach all anti-ballistic missile systems, we no longer consider the reduction of ballistic missiles and warheads to be highly critical.
И боеголовок.
So would these weapons be part of those discussions?
С той точки зрения, что
In the context that the number of delivery vehicles and the number of warheads they can or will carry should, of course, be included in the grand total. and we will show you from a distance what this will look like. Our military experts know how to conduct these inspections. In this sense, there are fine-tuned mechanisms and a sufficiently high level of trust. Generally, military experts are working together professionally. Politicians talk a lot, but military experts know what they're doing.
You're a politician.
I'm also an officer. I'm the commander-in-chief. And I also served as a military intelligence officer for 17 years.
Are you proud of that fact? Do you like the fact that you were in the KGB? Like people to know that?
I do not see it from an emotional perspective. This gave me a lot of experience in the most diverse fields. I found it useful when I moved on to the civilian sector. Of course, this positive experience helped me in this sense.
How so?
It helped me.
How did it help?
Вы знаете, я же...
You know, after I left the intelligence service, I worked as assistant director at St. Petersburg University. I worked with people, established contacts, motivated people to act and brought them together. This is very important in the academic environment. Later, I was deputy mayor of St. Petersburg. I assumed even greater and broader responsibility. I dealt with St. Petersburg's international ties, and that is a metropolis with a population of 5 million people. While working in this capacity in St. Petersburg, I first met Henry Kissinger. Of course, all this helped me in my work at the time, and my additional experience later helped me in my work in Moscow.
Do you think it gives you an advantage over your adversaries and your allies?
It's hard for me to say. I have no other experience. The only thing I know is that my partners, including heads of state and government, are exceptional and outstanding people. They have gone through stringent selection and elimination procedures. There are no chance people at this level, and each of them has his or her own advantages.
What about that? Because you've been in power for a long time here in Russia, poised to go into another term as president. You've had 4 American presidents come and go during that time. I'm wondering if you had a favorite, if there's one you liked more than the others.
I'm sorry, but this is not a very tactful question. Each of my partners is good in their own right. In all, we had good relations with practically all of them. With Bill Clinton, though he was leaving office, we were able to work together for several months. Then with Presidents Bush, Obama, and with the current president too, but to a lesser extent, of course. All of them have something to respect them for. At the same time, we can argue and disagree with each other, and it happens often. We have diverging views on many issues, even on key ones, but we nevertheless manage to maintain normal human relations. If it were not for that, it would have been not only harder, but much worse for everyone.
How important do you think it is to project strength as a president?
It is important not to project strength, but to show it. It's also important how we understand power. It doesn't mean banging the table with a fist or yelling. I think power has several dimensions. Firstly, one should be confident that he is doing the right thing. Secondly, he must be ready to go all the way to achieve the goals.
I wonder this because one of the images that we see of you in the United States is without the shirt on the horse. What's that about?
Well, I have breaks. There are your Russian colleagues, there is the internet, but we do not do this on purpose. They take the photos they like. I have lots of photos of me in the office working with documents, but nobody's interested in them.
You're saying they like the shirtless photos.
You know, I've seen photos of me riding a bear. I've not ridden a bear yet, but there are such photos already.
Now, what about you personally? Because your election's coming up in 2 weeks. You're 65 years old now. Most people would be slowing down a little in their lives. Do you see that for yourself at all in the future?
Ну, во-первых,
First, there are many politicians around the world who are older than I am and who are still working active,
работают очень активно.
Including in my country.
not only in the United States, in other countries too. There are many such people in Europe and everywhere in the world. But if a person assumes the highest offices, he must work as if he is doing it for the first and last day of his life.
Своей жизни. Как первый и последний. Но
There is the Constitution. I've never violated it, and I've never changed it.
так что я буду работать.
Of course, if voters give me the opportunity to serve another term, I will do it to the best of my ability.
Работать еще один срок, буду работать, разумеется, вот с полной отдачей сил.
Last question for tonight, because it's late.
Последний, поскольку уже поздно вопрос на сегодня.
What, and forgive me if this may be a long one, but what do you see as your greatest accomplishment as president? And what do you see as your biggest mistake? And what did you learn from it?
Вы знаете,
You know, these would be very close. Our biggest achievement is that our economy has changed radically. It has almost doubled in scale. The number of people living below the poverty line has decreased by half. At the same time, the number of people living below the poverty line remains large. And we must work on that. We must remove the gap between people with very high and very low incomes. In this context, we have many achievements and many unresolved issues. Back in the early '80s, our population shrank by nearly 1 million people a year. Can you imagine the scale of the disaster? Almost 900,000 people. We have reversed this trend. We have even achieved a natural population increase. We have very low infant mortality, and we have reduced maternal mortality to almost zero. We have prepared and are implementing a large-scale program of supporting mothers and children. Our life expectancy is growing at a high rate. Much has changed in our economy, but we have not achieved our main economic goal. We have not yet changed the economic structure as we need to. We have not yet reached the required growth of labor efficiency. But we know how to do it, and I'm confident that we'll do it. The thing is that we had no opportunity to do this before because until recently we did not have the macroeconomic conditions for taking specific measures in these areas. At the beginning of our path, inflation was about 30%, but now it's 2.2%. Our international reserves are growing, and we have achieved macroeconomic stability. This offers us an opportunity to take the next step towards enhancing labor efficiency, attracting investment, including private funds, and changing the structure of our economy. I'm talking in large blocks. There are also more specific areas such as modern technology and artificial intelligence, digitalization, biology, medicine, genome research, and so on.
Much more on the economy and how Russia's doing tomorrow and on your re-election. Thank you so much for your time tonight, Mr. President. I know you've had a long, long day. Look forward to meeting up with you in Kaliningrad.
Спасибо вам.
Mr. President, good to see you again.
Good afternoon.
So, we're here in Kaliningrad. Why is that? This is a port that I'm told could not be more threatening to NATO, to Europe. It's a Russian military base. It's a Russian military port. It's home to some of your nukes. Are you trying to send a message?
Итак, почему Калининград? Ну, потому что я регулярно езжу в
Why
регионы.
Kaliningrad?
Это один из
Because I regularly visit Russian regions.
систематически появляюсь, бываю.
This is one of
И
these regions.
на этот раз поводом была встреча.
This time I came here to attend a conference of the regional media, which they decided to hold here. It was not my decision, but theirs, your colleagues from the Russian regional media. I have an agreement with them that I attend such meetings once a year and meet with them, and that is why I'm here today. It doesn't have anything to do with any external signals. It's our domestic affair.
Understood. So the last time we met in June, I asked you about the conclusion of our American intelligence agencies that Russia interfered in our presidential election. You told me that there was nothing specific in these reports. That if there's anything specific, you said, then there will be something to discuss. You told me, as they used to say in the KGB, addresses, houses, names. Since then, 13 Russians and 3 Russian-owned companies have been indicted by a special prosecutor named Robert Mueller in the United States for interfering in our election. Yevgeny Prigozhin and others running a cyber warfare operation out of an office at 55 Savashkina Street, St. Petersburg, Russia. Addresses, houses, names. So can we have that discussion now?
Конечно, не просто можем. Мне кажется,
Of course, we not only can, but I think we must discuss this issue if it keeps bothering you. But if you think that the question has been asked, I'm ready to answer it.
Why would you allow an attack like this on the United States?
А почему вы решили, что власти России, и я в том числе, кому-то
What
разрешили?
makes you think that the Russian authorities and I gave our permission to anyone to do anything?
Кое-кто неизвестен.
You just named some people.
Физические лица.
I've heard about some of them I don't know, but they're just individuals.
Если даже
They
предположить,
don't
хотя я не
represent
уверен
the
на
Russian
100%,
government.
делали ли они что-то во время
Even if we
президентской
suppose, though I'm not
кампании, или не
100%
делали,
certain
я просто
that
об
they
этом ничего
did
не
something
знаю.
during the US
Но это не
presidential
имеет
election
ничего
campaign,
общего
I simply don't know anything about
с
it.
позицией российского государства.
It hasn't
Ведь речь шла о вмешательстве
anything to
России
do with the position of the Russian government.
государства во внутренние политические дела.
Nothing has changed since we
Ничего
spoke
с
last
тех пор,
time
как мы
in
с вами
St. Petersburg.
разговаривали в последний раз в Петербурге, не изменилось.
There are some names,
Появились
so
какие-то
what?
фамилии, ну и что?
It could
С таким
just
же
as well
успехом мы
be
могли
some
бы
Americans
каких-то
who,
американцев,
while
которые
living
сидят,
here, interfered
вмешиваются в
in your
ваш
own political
политический
processes.
процесс. Это
It
ничего
hasn't
не
changed
поменяло.
anything.
But it wasn't Americans, it was Russians. And it was hundreds of people, a monthly budget of $1.25 million to attack the United States in a cyber warfare campaign. You're up for re-election right now. Should the Russian people be concerned that you had no idea this was going on in your own country, in your own hometown?
Послушайте, мир очень большой и
You know,
многообразный.
the world is very large and diverse. We have rather complicated relations between the United States and the Russian Federation, and some of our people have their own opinion on these relations and react accordingly at the level of the Russian government and at the level of the Russian president. There has never been any interference in the internal political processes in the United States. You have named some individuals and said that they are Russian. So what? Maybe, although they're Russian, they work for some American company. Maybe one of them worked for one of the candidates. I have no idea about this. These are not my problems. Do you know that, for example, after the presidential election in the US, some Ukrainian officials sent messages congratulating Hillary Clinton, even though Trump had won? Listen, what do we have to do with this? Now, in my opinion, Mr. Manafort, that is his name, he was initially accused of having something to do with Russia's interference in the presidential election in the United States. It turned out that just the opposite was true. In fact, he had connections to Ukraine and he had some issues with Ukraine. What do we have to do with this? You know, we have no desire to interfere in the internal affairs of other countries. But if you are interested in talking about this, I would like to widen the scope of our discussion.
I do want to go through it. If we can do it step by step, I think that will be more clear for the viewers who are following us. Let me ask you this. You say the Russian Federation didn't order it. Do you condone these activities?
Нет.
No, we don't condone or order. But I say that there are internal political processes in the United States itself, and there are people who wanted to achieve some result. They could have used some tools in their countries, some technologies. Such technologies exist. They could have sent relevant information from France, from Germany, from Asia, from Russia. What do we have to do with all this? Well, all right, Russians, but they were not state officials.
What have you done to
Russians, and
satisfy
so
yourself
what?
of that
There are
fact?
146 million Russian people. So what?
Каким?
What fact?
What have you done to satisfy yourself that it wasn't Russians? You're suggesting maybe it was Americans, maybe it was the French. What have you done to satisfy yourself that the 13 Russian nationals who have just been indicted, those 3 Russian companies, including, as you point out, some of your close friends, were not behind this? This has caused an international incident.
Я знаю, что
I know that they don't represent the Russian state or the Russian government, and I have no idea what they did and what they were guided by. Even if they did something, then our American colleagues should not just say something in interviews with the media, but give us specific data with proof. We are ready to consider it and talk about it. But you know what I would like to say?
That would be great. Will you extradite them to the United States?
Never.
Россия вообще свои
Just like the United States, Russia does not extradite its citizens anywhere. Have you ever extradited any of your citizens?
Это во-первых.
This is my first point. Second, I don't believe anything illegal was committed. And third, we have repeatedly suggested that the United States and Russia establish relations in this area and sign a corresponding interstate treaty on extraditing criminals. The United States has evaded this proposal and doesn't want to sign it with Russia. What are you hoping for? That we'll extradite people to you and you will not? This is not the proper way to go about international affairs. There is more to it. Please listen to me and take it to your viewers and listeners what I'm about to say. We are holding discussions with our American friends and partners, people who represent the government, by the way, and when they claim that some Russians interfered in the US elections, we tell them, we did so fairly recently at a very high level, but you're constantly interfering in our political life.
Вы представляете, они даже этого не отрицают.
Would you believe it? They're not even denying it. Do you know what they told us the last time? They said, yes, we do interfere, but we are entitled to do so
Потому что мы
because
несем
we are spreading democracy and you're not, so you can't do it. Do you think this is a civilized and modern approach to international affairs?
Вот когда-то мы с вами вчера говорили о
Yesterday, you and I talked about nuclear weapons and that once the United States and the Soviet Union realized that they were moving towards possible mutual destruction, and they agreed on rules of conduct in the security sphere given the availability of weapons of mass destruction.
безопасности при наличии средств массового.
Let's now agree on how to behave in cyberspace, which never used to have such a big role and scope.
let me
И
ask
таком объеме не было. И мы предложили Соединенным Штатам.
We made a proposal to the United States, our partners back during President Obama's watch. Let us agree on how we build our relations, develop common rules acceptable for all, and adhere to them in cyberspace. The first reaction of the Obama administration was negative. But then at the very end of his presidential term, they told us, yes, it is interesting, let's talk about it. But again, everything disappeared and vanished in some swamp. Well, let's agree on this, and we're all
Okay,
for
so-
it.
So let me ask you. So you've stated explicitly you believe that America interfered in Russian elections, right?
The US does this all the time.
But Russia did not interfere in America's election.
No.
И не
And there are no plans in Russia to do so. It's impossible. It's
Why not?
impossible for us.
Why not? Why wouldn't you?
У нас и возможно.
First, we have
Во-первых, у нас
principles
есть свои принципы.
whereby we don't allow others to interfere in our domestic affairs and don't poke our noses into other people's business. This is a principle we have, and this is the first point I wanted to make.
Come on.
And my second
Come
point
on.
is that
You
we
You told me
don't have a
just yesterday.
comparable
You
number
told me
of
just
tools.
yesterday because we were
No,
amping
simply
up our
cannot
missile
do
defense
that.
systems. You had to respond in kind with increased nuclear technology. Now you want me to believe that we attack your Russian elections and you say we're going to take the high road.
This is not a matter of missiles. This is a completely different area.
Это совершенно другая
In
сфера
addition, we
деятельности.
lack the
Это
necessary
во-первых.
instruments.
Во-вторых, у нас нет таких инструментов.
Cyber warfare.
Это абсолютно другая.
This is a completely different area of activity. It has nothing to do with the cyber warfare. Russia does not have the kind of tools the US has. We do not have global media outlets comparable to CNN. You think we do? We have Russia Today and nothing else. This is the only Russian media outlet, and even then it was designated.
You have cyber tools.
И то вы
You keep interrupting me. This is impolite.
Forgive me, sir.
Значит, у нас
We have one media outlet, Russia Today, and even it was designated as a foreign agent so that it is unable to do its work properly. It is the only media outlet of this kind, while the US has a whole range of outlets and immense possibilities online. The internet is yours. The United States control all the internet governance tools, all located on US territory. Do you think that a comparison can be made in any way? This is simply impossible. Let us come together and agree on the rules of conduct in cyberspace, but it is
David
the
and
US
Goliath.
who refuses to do so.
The Mueller indictment is very specific about what the Russians were doing. There is a specific email, a damning email that is cited therein by who appears to have been caught red-handed. She says as follows: "We had a slight crisis here at work. The FBI busted our activity. Not a joke. So I got preoccupied with covering tracks together with the colleagues. I created all these pictures and posts, and the Americans believed that it was written by their people." And now you want to sit here and say you don't have the tools to do it, that we have the market on cyber interference? That's just not true.
I don't even understand what you're talking about. See, this is just nonsense. The US Congress analyzed the information from Russian sources that appeared online. The information coming from media outlets like Russia Today was also analyzed, and it turned out to be 1/100% of the overall information flow in the United States. Just 1/100%. Do you think that this fraction had any impact on the election? This is just nonsense, don't you see? This is the same old business when the people who lost refuse to admit it. You see, I've commented on this on a number of occasions. It's yet to be seen what the US policy towards Russia will be like under the current administration. Many things remain unclear, since we have not yet been able to start working or to establish normal contacts. However, it is absolutely clear that the current US president adopted a specific stance in terms of domestic policy and decided to reach out to the people who were ready to support his campaign promises. This is what led to his victory, not any kind of outside interference. To claim otherwise makes no sense. Will anyone believe that Russia, a country located thousands of kilometers away, could use 2 or 3 Russians, as you said, and whom I don't even know, to meddle in the elections and influence the outcome? Don't you think it sounds ridiculous?
Now you're talking about causation, but I'm still on whether you did it. And it's not true that you don't know the individuals who are accused of conducting this. One of your good friends is actually accused of helping conduct this. His name is Yevgeny Prigozhin. You know him?
I know this man, but he's not a friend of mine. This is just twisting the facts. There is such a businessman. He works in the restaurant business or something, but he's not a state official. We have nothing to do with him.
After you heard that he had been indicted, did you pick up the phone and call him?
Certainly not. I have plenty of other things to worry about.
He's your friend. He's just been indicted.
Did you hear what I just said? He's not my friend. I know him, but he's not a friend of mine. Was I not clear? There are many people like that. There are 146 million people in Russia. This is less than in the US, but still a lot.
Вы сказали, что
Prominent businessman, so what? There are many prominent people in Russia. He's not a state official. He does not work for the government. He's an individual, a businessman.
Some people say his real job is to do your dirty work.
Who are those people and what dirty work? I don't do any dirty work. Everything I do is in plain view. This is your prerogative. Some people in your country enjoy doing dirty work and you think we do the same. That's not true.
It's A, the fact that you know him, you admit that, he's a prominent Russian businessman, and he's specifically accused of running this operation. B, this is the same man who's been accused of sending Russian mercenaries into Syria, and they attacked a compound held by American-backed militia. This guy gets around.
You know, this man could have a wide range of interests, including, for example, an interest in the Syrian fuel and energy complex. But we don't support him in any way. We don't get in his way, and we don't support him either.
You didn't know about it.
It's his own personal initiative. Well, I know that there are several companies, several Russian companies there, maybe he's among others, but this has nothing to do with our policy in Syria. If he does anything there, he doesn't coordinate it with us. He probably coordinates it with the Syrian authorities or the Syrian businesses he works with. We don't interfere in this. Does your government interfere in every step your businesses take, especially small businesses? It's essentially a medium-sized business. So does your president interfere in the affairs of every medium-sized U.S. business? This is just nonsense, isn't it?
If the 13 Russian nationals plus 3 Russian companies did in fact interfere in our elections, is that okay with you?
I don't care. I don't care at all, because they don't represent the government. Not at all. They don't represent state interests. If you're worried about anything, state it officially. Send us documents proving it and explain what exactly those people are accused of. And we'll see if they violated Russian laws.
I did that.
No, this is not true. If they violated Russian law, we'll prosecute them. If they did not, there is nothing to prosecute them for in Russia. But after all, you must understand that people in Russia don't live under US law, but under Russian law. That's how it is. And if you want to reach an agreement with us, let's negotiate. Choose the subject, make an agreement, and sign it. But you refuse to do this. I'm telling you for the third time, we have proposed working together on cyberspace issues, but the US refuses to work like this and instead throws 13 Russians to the media. Maybe they're not even Russians, but Ukrainians, Tatars, or Jews, but with a Russian citizenship, which should also be checked. Maybe they have dual citizenship or a green card. Maybe the US paid them to do this. How do you know? And I don't know this either.
Well, I'll give you one piece of evidence. Andrei Krutskik is an advisor to the Kremlin when it comes to cyber issues. And in a speech to an information security forum in February of 2016, he reportedly said, quote, "I'm warning you. We're on the verge of having something in the information arena which will allow us to talk to the Americans as equals." What do you think he meant? Because it certainly sounds like a threat right before an election hack.
Sometimes I think you're joking.
No, I'm deadly serious.
A man says something about how he sees our contacts and our work with our foreign partners, the US in this case, in a certain area. I have no idea what he said. Ask him what he meant. Do you think I control everything?
He's an advisor to the Kremlin on cyber.
So what? There are 2,000 people working in the administration. Do you think I control everyone? Peskov is sitting in front of me. He's my press secretary, and he sometimes says things that I see on television and think, what is he talking about? Who told him to say this? I have no idea what he said. Ask him. Do you really think I can comment on everything administration or government personnel say? I have my own work to do.
I think when it comes to our two countries, you know exactly what's going on. And this is Russia's, it is. The heads of our U.S. intelligence agencies just testified to Congress that Russia poses the biggest threat in the world to American security, greater than ISIS. You can't get the sanctions lifted. The relationship between our two countries is nearly non-existent right now. Didn't this interference, whether you knew or you didn't know about it, backfire against Russia?
Listen, you're exaggerating.
Я так же, как не знаю, что
I don't know about someone saying something, and I'm not going to comment on it, and neither do I follow what's going on at your Congress. I'm more interested in what is going on at the State Duma. If they've approved the bill on healthcare or utilities issue, if they delay certain discussions or not, is a special interest lobbying against nature conservation or forestry or environmental law? This is what I'm interested in. You should follow what they're discussing in Congress. I have enough on my plate without that.
You know that the sanctions haven't been lifted. You know that the relationship between our two countries is at not an all-time low, but it's getting there. And this is in part the reason. And so Russian interference in the American election is important about it.
Listen, sanctions have nothing to do with the myth of some Russian interference in the US election. Sanctions are about something else entirely, the desire to halt Russia's progress, to contain Russia. This policy of containing Russia has been pursued for decades, on and off. Now it's back. It is a misguided policy, which does not only affect Russia-US relations, but also US businesses, because it frees up space for their competitors on our market. You and I were at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum. The largest business delegation was from the US. People want to work with us, but they are not allowed to. They're contained in order to contain Russia. They have been contained so that our defense industry cannot develop, among other things. We discussed this yesterday. Did they manage to achieve anything? No, they did not. They have never managed to contain Russia and never will. It is simply, an attempt with tools.
In cyber? Can we contain Russia in cyber warfare?
I think it's impossible to contain Russia anywhere. You need to understand this. Listen, you cannot even contain North Korea. What are you talking about? And why would you do that? Why do we have to contain, attack, or cast suspicion on each other? We're offering cooperation.
That's my question to you. Why? Why would you interfere in our election time and time again? And why wouldn't you, for that matter? Let me put it to you that way. You've spent a day in Moscow and now here in Kaliningrad telling me that America has interfered in Russia's electoral process and that a robust cyber warfare arsenal, and yet you want us to believe that you did not deploy it. Do you understand how implausible that seems, sir?
That does not seem implausible to me at all, because we don't have such a goal to interfere. We don't see what we have to gain by interfering. There's no such goal. Let's suppose this was our goal. Why? Just for the sake of it. What is the goal?
Creating chaos. That's the goal.
Listen to me. Not long ago, President Trump said something absolutely correct. He said that if Russia's goal was to sow chaos, it has succeeded, but it is not the result of Russian interference, but your political system, the internal struggle, the disorder and division. Russia has nothing to do with it whatsoever. Get your own affairs in order first. And the way the question is framed, as I mentioned, that you can interfere anywhere because you bring democracy, but we can't, this is what causes conflicts. You have to show your partners respect, and then they will respect you.
You once said, Mr. President, that you believed the interference in our election was done by some patriotic Russians. An answer like that, you understand, will lead people to ask, are you the patriotic Russian?
I'm the president of the Russian Federation. It's my constitutional duty to address a host of issues concerning the protection of Russia's interests. When I spoke of patriotic people, I meant that you can imagine that in the face of a deteriorating Russia-US relationship, people use cyberspace, will express their points of view, their opinions, including on this global network. Of course, they are free to do so. How can we really prohibit it? But we can't control it, and most importantly, we are not directing it. Please note that this is not the position of the Russian state.
You can't? The Russian intelligence services cannot find out who's doing this, bring it to your attention. You're unable to stop it?
Perhaps if we looked into it carefully, we would find those people if they exist. But we have no such goal. We propose holding official talks and you refuse. So what do you want? For us to open investigations just because Congress said so? Let's sit down, sign an agreement on working in cyberspace and comply with it. How do you want to do it? There is no other way of conducting international affairs.
So you have no goal to stop it. And so what does that mean for our elections in 2018 and 2020? We can expect more of the same?
I didn't say that stopping it is not our goal. I said that...
You just said that.
No, I didn't. I said that we don't interfere in our people's private lives and can't stop them from expressing their opinion, including on the internet. But I also said that Russia's official position is that we don't interfere in the political processes of other countries as a state. That's the most important part. I want it to be recorded in our conversation today for people in the US to understand this.
And forgive me, but I'm trying to get to one level below that, whether you have the goal of stopping your own citizens from behaving in this manner, which has undermined relationships between our two countries.
I want to say that we will stand in the way of everything that violates Russian law or our international agreements. For the third or fourth time, I'll say that we are ready to sign a corresponding agreement with the United States. You still refuse. Let's sit down at the negotiating table, identify what we consider important, sign the document, and comply with it with a proper verification.
You were president, sir, and respectfully, I still didn't hear an answer about whether you want to crack down on Russians who are crimes. It sounds like the answer is no. If I'm wrong, please correct me. I understand you want a negotiation with the United States directly, but internally you could put a stop to this if you had the desire.
I want you to listen to me. We will counter anything that violates current Russian law. If the actions of our citizens, no matter what they are or whom they target, violate current Russian laws, we will respond. If they don't violate Russian law, we can't respond with anything. If no Russian law has been broken, no one can be held accountable.
Would this violate Russian law?
I must look at what they've done. Give us the materials. Nobody has given us anything.
Hacking into the Democratic National Committee, hacking into John Podesta's email, creating in our election false information on Twitter, on Facebook, spreading misinformation when it comes to Black Lives Matter, when it comes to the shooting we just had in Parkland, Florida, when it comes to our presidential election, spreading fake news in order to alter the course of a presidential race. That's what I'm talking about.
With all due respect for you personally and for the body of the people's representatives, the U.S. Congress, and we treat all these people with respect, I want you to really understand this. Do you have people with training in law? Of course you do. 100%. Highly educated people. We can't even launch an investigation without cause. Our conversation today or an inquiry in the US Congress is not sufficient cause. Give us at least an official inquiry with a statement of facts. Send us an official paper. After all, a conversation on air can be grounds for an investigation.
Intelligence agencies in the United States. Now a special prosecutor with a criminal indictment. That's not enough for you to look into it?
Absolutely not. If you don't have legal training, I can assure you that an inquiry is required for this. Then you should understand that a corresponding official inquiry should be sent to the Prosecutor General's office of the Russian Federation. That said, we don't even have a treaty on how to proceed. But send us something in writing at least.
Whether this was done undermines its relations with a major partner, the United States of America.
Give us something in writing, an official inquiry, and we'll take a look
the
at
last
it.
time, and now I'm back with an indictment.
There is nothing in writing. Send an inquiry to the Prosecutor General's office. It's necessary to go through official channels rather than with the help of the media and harsh words in the US Congress, leveling accusations against us that are totally unsubstantiated. Give us something in
Let me
writing.
ask you this. You were president back in 2001 when the FBI arrested one of its own, Robert Hanssen, for spying for the Russian Federation. In retaliation, President George W. Bush kicked 50 alleged Russian spies out of the United States, and the Kremlin did the same, throwing 50 Americans out of the U.S. Embassy in Moscow immediately. This is a tradition that goes back for decades. December 2016, after our intelligence agencies agreed that Russians interfered in our election, President Obama expelled dozens of Russians and seized 2 Russian-owned properties. And yet, you did nothing. You did nothing in response. Why not?
We believed, and I still believe, that there were no grounds for this whatsoever. This is the first point. Secondly, this was done in clear violation of international law and the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations. The totally groundless seizure of our property constitutes a flagrant violation of international law. We were strongly hoping for a response from the new administration, but since none is forthcoming, and I've already said this and the foreign minister repeated this, we will turn to the appropriate courts of the United States to protect our interests.
Let me ask you about President Trump. Anytime he says anything, it is supremely deferential. Never a harsh word for you. Although if you look at the way he speaks about members of his own party, even of his own staff, never mind other political leaders, he frequently personally insults them. Why do you think he's so nice to you?
This is not about being nice to me personally, in my view. I think he's an experienced person, a businessman with very extensive experience, and he understands that if you need to partner with someone, you must treat your future or current partner with respect. Otherwise, nothing will come out of it. I think this is a purely pragmatic approach. This is my first point. Second, even though this is his first term as president, he's a quick study, and he understands perfectly well that trading accusations or insults at our level is a road to nowhere. It would just mean depriving our countries of their last chance for dialogue, simply the last chance. This would be extremely unfortunate. You may have noticed that I, for my part, show respect to him and all my other colleagues, not only in the United States, but also Europe and Asia.
You may, but the truth is our president has referred to the leader of North Korea as Little Rocket Man. So he's not quite as diplomatic talking about. I'm sure you saw that, yes?
Yes, I did. You are aware of our position on that account. We urge everyone to show restraint.
So, what do you think of President Trump?
Это вопрос.
The question is not entirely appropriate because President Trump's work should be assessed by his constituents, the American people. There is one thing, though, that I would like to say, like it or not. We may dislike certain things as well, but he does his best to keep the election promises that he made to the American people. So, he is consistent in this sense. I think that, in fact, this is the only proper way to show respect for the people who voted for him.
He's praised your leadership. Is he an effective leader?
Well, again, this is up to the American people to decide. He has strong leadership qualities, of course, because he takes responsibility when he makes decisions. To reiterate, whether some people like his decisions or not, he still goes ahead and does it. This, of course, is a sign of leadership qualities.
Do you ever read his tweets?
No, I don't.
Do you ever tweet?
No.
Why not?
I have other means of expressing my point of view or making decisions. Well, Donald is a more modern person.
Would you say he's more colorful than you are?
Maybe.
Let me ask you one question going back to the election interference issue. There are two theories on you at least. One is that Clinton was Secretary of State. You felt that she interfered with elections here in 2011 and 2012, inciting protests here, including against you, and it made you angry. Two is that when the Panama Papers were leaked, showing a massive money trail that led to you and some of your associates, that was the last straw for you. Either of those things make you angry?
This is complete nonsense. Speaking about Hillary, I know her personally, and we generally always maintained a good dialogue every time we met. I can't understand why, at some stage, her advisors probably suggested that she focus part of her election campaign on criticizing developments in Russia. Well, it was their choice. I never took it personally. It was just their policy. As for all those files, this is complete nonsense. They mentioned some of my friends, so what? As you know, this has had no effect whatsoever. This is nothing but nonsense and media chatter. I've forgotten all about it. I don't even remember what it was all about. Actually, nothing of this kind can make me angry. I'm guided by pragmatic considerations, not emotions.
Since you mention it, a friend of yours mentioned in those Panama Papers, let me ask you about Sergei Roldugin. Legend has it that this guy introduced you to your ex-wife, that he's godfather to one of your daughters. He's a cellist by trade, right?
Yes, I know him very well. He is a friend and a wonderful musician. He has devoted his life to art and music. By the way, many artists here are also involved in business one way or another. Apart from me, Sergei also has other ties in the country, including business people who have involved him in this work. He has made his money legally. He hasn't made hundreds of billions. Everything he earned, he has spent on the purchase of musical instruments abroad, which he has brought to Russia. He uses some of these instruments personally. For example, the cello. He plays the cello.
A $12 million Stradivarius, right?
Yes, something like that. But it is a unique instrument. Yes, it is. He must be eccentric, but then all artists are eccentric. To spend all this money on musical instruments. I think he bought 2 cellos and 2 violins. He plays one himself and has given the others to other musicians who are playing them. He has brought all these instruments to Russia.
But according to the Panama Papers, this massive series of leaked documents about offshore bank accounts, he's got assets, this cellist, of at least $100 million, including a 1/8 stake in Russia's biggest TV ad agency, a $6 million yacht, a stake in a truck manufacturer, a 3% interest in a Russian bank. He must be one heck of a musician.
Вы знаете, я не
Well,
в курсе его.
I know nothing about his business, but I do know that he has only enough money to buy these musical instruments. All the rest is on paper. He doesn't have anything else apart from what he's bought. Maybe he does have something else, but you should ask him about it. I don't control his life.
But the question is how a cellist makes that much money. People ask it because many people believe that's really your money.
Послушайте, вы возьмите
Listen, just look at many Russian art figures, and probably there are people like this in your country as well. After all, there are art personalities in the US, including Hollywood celebrities, who either run restaurants or own some stock. Aren't there many people like this in the US entertainment industry and art world? I'm sure that there are many people of this kind, and more than in Russia. In Russia, there are also quite a few art figures who do business apart from their creative work. In fact, there are many such people, and he's just one of them. So what? The question is not whether he runs a business or not, or whether he made a profit or not. The question is whether there were any violations. As far as I know, he did not commit any
There's no issue with
violations.
making money. I'm an American. We're capitalists. The question is whether that's really your money.
Это точно.
This is not my money, that's for sure. I don't even know how much Mr. Aldugin has, as I've already said. As far as I know, he has not committed any violations in his business and creative undertakings. He did not violate any Russian law or norm.
Speaking of money, back in the 1980s and 1990s, in the wake of multiple bankruptcies, the Trump Organization found it hard to secure loans in the United States and looked elsewhere. Mr. Trump's son, Donald Trump Jr., said 10 years ago, and I quote, "Russians make up a pretty disproportionate cross-section of a lot of our assets. We see a lot of money pouring in from Russia." Were you aware of the degree of Russian money flowing to Trump properties?
This is all nonsense. There were no investments in Trump properties in Russia, as far as I know. I don't even know if there were any serious plans for making these investments. Look, you keep thinking that the whole world revolves around you. That's not the way it is.
So it's not about me, it's about what Donald Trump Jr. says.
Do you think we know everything what Donald Trump's son has said? See, this is not the way things are. Donald came here to Russia when he was not even nominated. I didn't even know that he had been to Russia. I learned about it only afterwards, when I was told, as it turned out, he'd been to Russia. But by the same token, I know what his son said on this occasion. Did Donald Trump's son infringe on any rules or laws? If so, charge him. If he did not, why do you keep picking on every word?
Years ago, before Donald Trump ran for president, he said he knew you and that he spoke with you a lot.
No, I had never met him. You mean before he became president and before he decided to run for president?
Before he ran.
No, we had not met. We never talked to each other, either by phone or otherwise.
You are poised to be reelected for your 4th term as president here in Russia, right?
We'll see what the Russian voters decide.
How does somebody like Vladimir Putin, who's as popular as you are here in Russia, feel any threat from Navalny? I realize he's gotten in legal trouble, but couldn't you pardon this guy and let him mount a meaningful challenge to you?
Вопрос о том, с кем я мог...
As for the question about whom I could work together with and whom I would not want together with, I can tell you in all honesty that I would like to and I'm ready to work with people who want Russia to become a stronger, more effective, competitive and self-reliant country.
страной стала самодостаточной, но
But to achieve that, the people we are talking about should have a clear plan of action designed to promote national development in today's environment. There are people like that, including
But Navalny is such a man. Navalny is such a man and has a fair amount of popularity here in Russia.
помиловать можно любого
any
человека,
person can be pardoned if he
если он этого
deserves it.
заслуживает.
Why don't you?
Если он этого заслуживает.
If he deserves it.
Значит, исключений здесь нет ни для
There are no exceptions for anyone, no exceptions.
Но мы же сейчас говорим
But
не об
we are not talking about pardon now.
определенных политических силах.
We are talking about certain political forces. They don't have a development program for the country.
Что мне, в принципе, нравится? Это то, что
What they do have that is positive and what I like is that they expose problems, and this is actually good. This is the right thing to do, and it needs to be done. But this is not enough for the country's progressive development. Simply not enough, because focusing on problems is not enough.
не просто мало, а это даже опасно.
Moreover, it's even dangerous because it can lead to destruction, while we need creation.
Our political analysts tell me you're exactly right about your chances in the upcoming election, that you have no meaningful opponent, so you will likely win. What's next after that? The Chinese president just abolished term limits. Is that something you would ever do?
Я не думаю,
I
что
don't
мы
think
сейчас
that
в этой
I should talk about my political plans with you now at this meeting, in this conversation, in this interview for American television. But I think I told you yesterday, I never changed the constitution or adjusted it to my needs, and I don't have any such plans today. As for China, before criticizing decisions in a country like China, you need to think and recall that there are 1.5 billion people living there. And after thinking about it, you need to come to the conclusion that we're all interested in China being a stable and prosperous state. How it should be done best, it's probably up to the Chinese people and the Chinese leadership.
Can you leave power? Because some of the experts that we've spoken to have said it would be near impossible for you, because someone in your position would likely either be thrown in jail by your adversaries or worse. They said it's actually sad that you'll have to stay in power.
Ваши так называемые
What your
эксперты,
so-called experts say is they're wishful thinking.
я уже много
I've heard a lot of nonsense like this. Why do you think that I will necessarily be succeeded by people ready to destroy everything I've done in recent years? Maybe on the contrary, a government will come to power determined to strengthen Russia, to create a future for it, to build a platform for development for new generations. Why have you suddenly decided that some destroyers would arrive and wipe out whatever they can? Maybe there are people who would like this, including in the United States, but I don't think they're right, because the United States, I think, should be interested in the other option, in Russia being a stable, prosperous, and developing country. I mean, if you really can look at least 25 to 50 years ahead.
Have you groomed a successor? Is there anyone in mind?
Я с 2000 года.
I've been thinking about this since the year 2000.
Но думать не вредно.
Thinking is not a crime, but in the end, the choice will still be up to the Russian people.
Все равно
Whether I like or hate someone, other candidates will run for president, and eventually the citizens of the Russian Federation will make the final decision.
Let me ask you a bit about Syria. Do you believe the chemical weapons attacks in Syria are fake news?
Of course. Firstly, the Syrian government destroyed its chemical weapons a long time ago. Secondly, we know about the Moldan's plans to simulate chemical attacks by the Syrian army. And thirdly, all the attempts that have been made repeatedly in the recent past and all the accusations were used to consolidate the efforts against Assad. We are aware of these goings on, and they're not interesting. One wants to say boring.
The bodies of dead children, thanks to sarin gas attacks?
Are you sure that these deaths are the result of chemical attacks by the Syrian government? I, on the contrary, blame this on the criminals and radicals, on the terrorists who are staging these crimes in order to lay the blame on President Assad.
That's not what the United Nations has concluded, that they autopsied the dead children. Your foreign minister suggested it was all made up. Do you believe that?
Of course. I'm absolutely sure that it was, because there was no serious investigation.
There were no dead bodies.
Maybe there were dead bodies, which is to be expected in a war. Look how they liberated Mosul. It was razed to the ground. Look how they liberated Raqqa. The dead have not yet been removed from the ruins or buried. Do you want to talk about this?
That's what we call whataboutism. That's you pointing to somebody else's bad behavior to justify your own or that of your ally. We're talking about Assad and dead children thanks to sarin gas, and you're telling the national audience it never.
Look here. To be sure that this was indeed how it happened, a thorough investigation must be conducted and evidence must be gathered at the site. Nothing of this has been done. Let's do this.
Let's do it. They wanted to investigate the helicopters. UN wanted to go and check out the helicopters that were on site, and Russia said no. Russia said no. Why?
There was nothing of the kind. Russia did not say no. Russia is for a full-scale investigation. If you don't know this, I'm telling you this now. It's not true that we are against an objective investigation. That's a lie. It's a lie, just as the vial with the white substance that allegedly proved that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, which the CIA gave to the U.S. Secretary of State. He later apologized, but the damage had been done, the country had been ruined. This is yet another piece of fake news which has no substance behind it. An investigation should be conducted to gather the substance. We are in favor of such an investigation.
Since the beginning of the year, there have been at least four chlorine-based chemical weapons attacks in Syria. Our Secretary of State, Tillerson, just said that Russia bears the responsibility for this, given your earlier promises to rein in chemical weapons attacks in Syria. Your response?
I will tell you that A, we have nothing to do with this and that we demand a full-scale investigation. As for crimes, go back to Raqqa and at least bury the dead bodies which are still lying amid the ruins after the airstrikes at residential neighborhoods there. And investigate these attacks. This will give you something to do.
One of the questions our audience is going to have is, how do we walk this back? How do we get to the place where these two great nations are less adversaries and something closer to allies, which we clearly are not right now. Do you agree we are not?
Unfortunately, we are not, but we're not the ones who made the U.S. our adversary. It was the U.S. Congress who called Russia its adversary. Why did you do that? Did Russia impose sanctions on the United States? No, it was the U.S. that imposed
You know
sanctions
why.
on us.
Мы что ли?
No, I don't.
Я могу вам тогда
Can I ask you a different question? Why did you encourage the government coup in Ukraine? Why did you do that? The U.S. directly acknowledged spending billions of dollars to this end. This was openly acknowledged by U.S. officials. Why do they support government coups and armed fighting in other countries? Why has the U.S. deployed missile systems along our borders? Listen, Russia and the U.S. should sit down and talk it over in order to get things straight. I have the impression that this is what the current president wants, but he's prevented from doing it by some forces. But we are ready to discuss any matter, be it missile-related issues, cyberspace, or counter-terrorism efforts. We are ready to do it at any moment, but the U.S. should also be ready. The time will come when the political elite in the U.S. will be pushed by public opinion to move in this direction. We will be ready the instant our partners are ready.
Before I leave you, what do you hope your legacy will be?
Я просто
I
уверен.
strongly believe that my legacy would be to create a powerful development momentum for Russia and make the country a resilient and balanced democracy that is able to benefit from the latest advances of the technology revolution. We will keep up our efforts to improve our political system and the judiciary, and I'm certain that all this taken together would strengthen the unity of the Russian Federation, the unity of our people, and enable us to move forward with confidence for years to come.
Mr. President, thank you very much for having us here.
Thank you.